Hi, I'm nervous, and today we are going to be doing something a little cozier. Obviously, if you've clicked on the video, you already know what we're doing, so I should not have to explain it to you, but let's assume that this video has auto-played as you are folding the laundry, doing the dishes, staring into the void, contemplating reality itself. Or maybe just you're playing some game on your phone and I'm barely registering to you at this point. I will let you know that we are reacting to John Fuhnaff solving Secret of the Mimic, which thank goodness, because there was just no hope for me doing it. I have been a little bit checked out from Five Nights at Freddy's lately, not because it doesn't interest me, but because there is so much going on that it's fairly overwhelming, and so I've just been kind of taking a break. Of course, I have put out at least one Secret of the Mimic theory. I think very specifically one. Yeah, I tapped out pretty immediately there. But you can watch that video. I'll have it linked wherever it makes sense for it to be linked, and potentially in the description, who knows. But I won't belabor the point. We're reacting to John today. I will say right up at the front that I have always appreciated John's interpretations of the franchise, and because of that, it may make it a little bit difficult for me to be as impartial as maybe I would be reacting to any other people's theories. That doesn't mean that I will necessarily agree with this theory, nor does it mean that I always agree with the things that John says, but I just like the way that he interprets Five Nights at Freddy's. He's the person who really got me interested in reading the books, specifically the Silver Eyes trilogy, and it really did open my eyes a lot more to things going on in Five Nights at Freddy's, and got me into the books, which I think was really great because I've actually really enjoyed reading them. If you don't know, I've also made a series about that, but I said I wasn't going to belabor the point, and here I am belaboring it, so let's get into it. The last thing I'll say is that I may be cutting parts of this theory out, so of course, watch the entire thing on John's channel. Okay, are we ready? I'm gonna put my headphones on and we're gonna get started.
What if I told you that there's one singular object that helped me solve not just Secret of the Mimic, but the last 6 years of FNAF lore? And that-
I would say, duh, frankly. Are we not all, it's always one thing, the thing we missed, the thing I missed, the thing you missed, the thing we all missed. Someone saw it, and this time it was John.
One object is a paperclip. A paperclip
Let's
helped
go.
me understand the broader theme of all of the modern FNAF games. And
I live for that. I live for the mundane. Let's go paperclip solving FNAF. Let's go. I can't wait to see how this plays out, frankly.
by the end of this video, I think you'll agree with me. I spent the last month working on this theory, and I'm so excited to share it with you. But there's also no way I'll be able to cover everything in Secret of the Mimic, so make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future theories.
Are you subscribed? Why does it say I'm not subscribed? Oh, that's because I'm not... I'm not logged into the right YouTube channel. That's why I'm not subscribed. I was like, what is it saying I'm not subscribed for? I'm logged into a different YouTube channel than I normally am. So, John, you're the only channel that I am subscribed to on this specific YouTube account. But we're gonna go ahead and like the video. I promise on my other channel, I am certainly subscribed. On my main channel, on the She's Nervous channel. Okay.
Let's get started. Secret of the Mimic opens with us playing as a Fazbear Entertainment employee named Arnold. Dispatch from Fazbear Entertainment tells Arnold to go to the workshop of one of their contractors named Edwin Murray. We learn
I'm just going to say this now because otherwise I might forget to say it. And I mean, if I'm not yapping, what is a reaction, frankly? But this is really a big part of why I had to just kind of stop talking about Secret of the Mimic and even consuming Secret of the Mimic content for a while, because every video I clicked on, and this is good, I'm not mad at them for doing this, of course. Oh, I need to turn captions on. The game summary section of these videos and just writing about Secret of the Mimic is why I literally had to, like, well, not the only reason, but it was a very big contributing factor as to why I had to take a break from all of it, because I was like, I cannot hear one more person, including myself, summarize Secret of the Mimic. Like, I can't do it. I understand that this stuff is necessary, and I could just skip it. But I want to hear how other theorists, summarize the game. And the things that these people point out in the beginning here are probably foreshadowing for, like, they're laying breadcrumbs, and I want to hear the entire narrative. But I get, my brain tells me We're bored, girl. Do something else. Anyway, back into the video.
From dispatch that Edwin has gone missing. The whole premise of the game is that Fazbear Entertainment wants the schematics for something called the Mimic. The Mimic was an endoskeleton that Edwin Murray built, and it was designed with the ability to fit into—
Ooh, hold on, I'd never looked at that before. I'm intrigued. Okay. Yo. Sorry, I'd never seen this before, so I just kind of wanted to see it. It's so humanoid in a way that I feel like the endos that come later in the franchise, earlier ones that we were introduced to, it looks so much more sophisticated than those.
the ability to fit into any costume and be any character. And Fazbear Entertainment wants that technology for themselves.
We think that endoskeleton has a lot of potential.
So they're sending in Arnold to get it for them. But what Arnold doesn't know is that the Mimic is roaming the warehouse, brutally killing anyone who enters. This then leads to the rest of the game, where we explore Edwin's abandoned workshop and learn more about his company, his inventions, and his family. We learn that Edwin had a wife named Fiona and a son named David. It's also revealed that Edwin's company, Murray's Costume Manor, was actually started by his dad, with Edwin and Fiona both being employees at the company. This is where they would meet, fall in love, and have their son David. But sometime during all of this, Edwin's dad passes away, with the company now being—
Edwin's dad is the neighbor from Hello Neighbor? I've never seen that. I mean, like, it probably was on the wall somewhere, but I just didn't catch it. He just looks shifty. I don't know. It's very, like, orange motif going on with the tie. Okay, anyway, sorry.
Edwin then decides to change course with the company and start developing some of his own inventions. Along with creating these inventions, Edwin also worked with Fazbear Entertainment on—
What's this? It doesn't look like Edwin's signatures. It's supposed to be like an artist's signature.
something called the Fall Fest. The Fall Fest was something that Scott and Steelwool heavily teased in Help Wanted 2, with the debut of the Fall Fest 1970 poster, along with multiple minigames taking place at the Fall Fest. But as
this was in Help Wanted 1 as well, the Fall Fest. It was just a different year.
we know from Help Wanted 2, every single Fall Fest minigame ended in fire, and now we know why. During the game, we get an audio log from Fiona, where she says that she's going to the Fall Fest, but the day she went to the Fall Fest was the day it burnt down, leading to her death. Edwin was a pretty absent father to David, with him constantly choosing work over spending time with his family.
Hey, you're not allowed to badmouth Edwin. You can't say anything bad about Edwin, because he's got some staunch defenders out there. No ill will to Edwin or else, frankly. He had it hard. Sorry, the nepotism baby doesn't get my sympathy.
Just give me a minute. I had the best idea.
That's great, honey, but you're missing the part.
There it is. There's the picture.
Because of this, Fiona was David's main caretaker. But now that she was gone, Edwin came up with a new plan. He decided to build the Mimic, an endoskeleton that could take care of David while he worked. Edwin called it M1. Soon after this, M1 started mimicking Fiona's voice and acted as if it was Fiona.
Fiona, did you make this?
I baked it myself.
Honestly, like, the creepiest thing is him calling it Fiona. I think I'm just now really getting the whole thing in my head that he's calling it Fiona. He is enabling. That's just uncomfortable for me.
Edwin then accepted M1 as a full-on replacement for his late wife. Not long after this happened, Edwin's son David would also die tragically on his birthday. But while Edwin was grieving his son's death, M1 came up with an idea. Edwin was able to replace Fiona, so why not do the same for David? Edwin then started working on M2 to replace David. To do this, he took M1's program out of the Mimic endoskeleton and put it into a supercomputer called F10N4, aka the Mixes machine that we saw in Ruin.
Okay, so it's important to note, I'm trying to pay attention to when people are speaking about F10N4 as if it is the same computer as Mixes or if it is a different computer, because I've heard both things. I have investigated some people's claims, and I'm not going to speak definitively here, but there were people who pointed out to me that the light pattern on the machines is different, and I checked it, and they are correct about that, even though almost, like, everything else is, like, one-to-one, obviously. One of them says Mixes on it, and the other one doesn't, but...
called F10N4, aka the mixes...
Okay, it's hard to see here, but this is red right here at the end of this.
supercomputer
It's like an
called
orangey reddish light.
F10N4, aka the mixes...
And when you look at the Mixes machine, this is a green light rather than a red one. Is that a smoking gun? I don't know. When I played the game, I had the very exact same thought as FNAF here, where I'm like, oh, look, it's the same machine. It was repurposed to be the Mixes machine. But then other people suggested that they were, in fact, different computers, and that there are things in the game that suggest that there are two computers, and I won't like get in the way of that stuff. I would still not be surprised if they are the exact same computer. Even I know that some people have told me that that is not possible. I just want to say it out loud just for argument's sake, that I still, even with all of that information, would not be surprised if this is the exact same computer as the F10N4. Let's just go full screen cam for a second. I've gotten to the point with Five Nights at Freddy's that it is very hard for me to say anything definitively, which feels like another reason why it's been really hard for me to make theories about this game, because I feel like every time I say something, there is a rebuttal that says, like, well, such and such says this is impossible. Maybe it's a critical thinking skill issue, or, like, on my part, not on anybody else's part, but maybe it's an issue of I have bad recall maybe in a moment. And frankly, I know I haven't spent as much time physically in this game as a lot of other people, so... You know, I've tried to go through and read every single computer log. I've done that. I've gone through and listened to every audio log that there is. I've done what I feel like is my due diligence and didn't come to the same conclusion. But that's just one of the reasons why, in general, FNAF theorizing has become really complicated for me, because I get, not even overthink, but my brain just kind of goes around in circles where I'm just like, well, but no, I can't say that because it's not set in stone. But it's like you have to pick when you're having, like, when you are doing this, you do have to pick a direction to come from. Maybe I just need to calm down. Maybe we could all calm down a little. I don't know. Not that people are necessarily, like, aggressive towards me about anything. I don't know. What were we talking about? Oh yeah, let's get back into this. My bad.
This allowed him to then put M2 into the endoskeleton. But once M2 started successfully mimicking David, Edwin realized that he made a huge mistake. In a fit of grief and rage, he beat up the mimic endoskeleton.
Stop. Not him. You're not. Stop sounding like him.
I cannot listen to that with any level of seriousness. It sounds so goofy.
After this happened, M2 then started mimicking that violence. This is how the murderous mimic endoskeleton we see throughout the game came to be. By the time Arnold gets to Murray's Costume Manor, M1 is still stuck in Mixes, and the mimic roams the workshop, copying the violence that Edwin taught it by killing anyone who enters. Fazbear isn't the only one who wants the schematics for the mimic. M1 from inside of Mixes wants them too. M1 then guides us throughout the game as if they are dispatch. Once we successfully get the schematics for the mimic, M1 then tells us to put them into the inventory machine. If you refuse to give the schematics to M1, you enter a hatch in the floor and make your way down to the research.
Oh my gosh, I don't know if I ever saw that moon face the first time. Hello, what are we doing? Oh, heavens to Betsy, that is disgusting. I think when I got in this, I didn't look back up. This is also giving sister location in such a real way. I don't know if John is going to bring that up, but it is crazy to me because a long, long time ago, John said that sister location or just the fun times in general and the mimic were linked definitively. And people laughed, but I mean, I don't know. It's giving sister location elevator, but that is creepy. I never saw that before. Why in the world would you make it look at you like that? This is like some Walton Files level of unnerving imagery. I don't like that. Okay, sorry. Anyway.
Research and development part of the building. Eventually, you then get to meet M1 face to face. Here, she begs Arnold to go to Edwin's home and convince him to repair M2. We then make our way to Edwin's home only to find that he's not there and that M2 likely killed him. After getting chased down by the Mimic, we learn from M1 that the reason she wants Edwin to fix M2 is because she wants her son back.
I just want to say this too before we keep going. There's also been some debate about whether or not M2 killed Edwin. And I appreciate, John saying here, likely did that, not definitively did that. In my opinion, even if like the explosion was not the program trying to kill Edwin, my interpretation of killed Edwin was left Edwin to basically starve. At the end of the day, like Edwin suffered and was not recovered. M2 was just like, oh, I'm just busy, and like neglected Edwin, right? And to me, that's more of like, oh, why did Edwin die? Not necessarily because, the Mimic came over and like ripped his legs off or set him on fire or exploded him. None of that. I don't know that that's like what the narrative is largely, but for me, I see people being like, I don't know why people think that Edwin was killed by M2 when we like never see that happen. I think that the implication is more that he was left to die, and that's you would still be, if the M2 program were a human able to be charged with a crime, it would still be a murder. Like you still did that. If you lock somebody somewhere or keep them away from getting medical attention or something and they slowly die, like that, you still like effectively killed them. So that's more the way I'm interpreting that, and I just wanted to put that out there because I know there is some debate on that.
Arnold then leaves Edwin's workshop as it burns to the ground. But while he's driving
Nutty.
away, the Mimic catches up to him, crashes the car, grabs the schematics for the Mimic, and walks away. So, I think we can all agree that this game was a lot. There's a ton of story,
yes.
a ton of big reveals, and a ton of details. When I sat down to write this theory, I honestly struggled with where to start. So for my first big...
John, yes. Me too. I don't know what in the world I'm supposed to talk about. I picked Fiona because I liked her.
Theory on Secret of the Mimic, I decided to start at the beginning. What was the actual first mistake that Edwin made that caused everything to go wrong? Well, that one question led me down a month-long rabbit hole of research and analysis, all leading to the paperclip.
Let's go.
But in order to figure out what went wrong, we first need to solve one of the biggest mysteries in the entire game. How did M1 start mimicking Fiona's voice in the first place? At first, I thought it was pretty obvious. We learn in the game that Edwin had Fiona record a bunch of lines for Mrs. Helpful.
Excuse me, can I borrow
Plenty
your
of
voice for a
plenty.
project?
What kind of voice should I do?
These are clear recordings of Fiona's voice, so it would make sense that M1 might have heard those recordings and started mimicking them. That would be the simple answer, but Scott and Steelwool put one thing in the game that nearly broke me. Sometime after Fiona died, Edwin brought a radio down to the basement, switched the frequency to 4625, and suddenly heard Fiona's voice. At first, I thought this was trying to show us that this was Fiona's spirit, but I don't think that's the case because in an audio log at the end of the game, you can hear Edwin say this.
I let a machine raise my kid. You're not real.
It is me. I'm Fiona.
Stop talking like her. You're not her.
I don't think Edwin would say this if he thought Fiona's spirit was in M1.
I agree with that because I've heard people say that Edwin really did believe that it was Fiona. There's a chance that for some period of time that he may have believed something to that effect, that, a miracle had happened, but ultimately he came to the realization. And frankly, this is, again, similar to the Silver Eyes, right, where Henry seems to realize as he is building the fourth Charlie, took him a couple more models before he started to get it. He realized that he would never be able to really bring Charlie back, and that something about the fourth Charlie bot was wrong, and it was because he was starting to get angry rather than feel it wasn't just grief, it was a lot of anger, and that was making that fourth Charlie bot wrong.
So if it's not Fiona's spirit talking through the radio, then what is it? Well, if you look at the specific line that was said through Edwin's radio, you might notice that this isn't the first time we've heard Fiona say this. In the birthday films at the end of the game, we can hear Fiona say this exact same line to Edwin.
Yes.
Clinovac.
That's great, honey, but you're missing the party.
Whatever was speaking through Edwin's radio in the basement was repeating a line that Fiona said while she was still alive. It was literally mimicking something she said, which then made me think that it was the mimic speaking through the radio. But there's one problem with that. I don't think the mimic endoskeleton was even invented yet when Edwin heard this, since Edwin says it's her or someone that sounds like her.
This is where I heard it. It's her or someone that sounds like her.
The idea that this could be the mimic doesn't even come to his mind yet. So that begs the question, who is mimicking Fiona before the mimic even exists? Well, the answer to that question has actually been hiding in plain sight the entire time.
It was the paperclip? No, I imagine he's talking about the Bacillium Men, right?
This thing.
Yeah.
Let me explain. Every week leading up to Secret of the Mimic, Steel will release a new video called MCM Archive.
Yes.
Each video was an advertisement for one of Edwin's new inventions, including the Clinovac, Stay Up Latte, Murray's Magic Coat Rack, and the Mycelium Men. And I think these inventions play a much bigger role in the story than we originally thought. In the audio log where we learned that Edwin would be taking over the company, one of the first things he says he wants to do is make some of his inventions real.
We could start making some of my inventions for real.
So
You know what I just realized is that Edwin also doesn't have a mom. What is this? Why does Edwin have a dad and not a mom? That is mentioned. Oh, that we even see a photo of on the wall.
we know that these inventions were the first thing Edwin made after taking over the company.
Yeah.
And if you look at the commercials for these inventions, it's very clear that there's some sort of mimic AI already inside of them.
Wow.
I know what you want better than you do.
The Mimic program, Always Watching and Learning, is something we literally see the Mimic do in Ruin, with two of the biggest examples being the eyeballs showing up all over the place,
Eyeballs? Really?
and the daycare attendant saying, quote, "The googly eyes just stare." We also hear at the end of the Mycelium Men commercial that Edwin calls these inventions, quote, "smart toys."
Another smart toy from Murray.
These toys very clearly have the Mimic program inside of them, which means that the Mimic program didn't originate with Edwin building M1, it originated with these inventions. The thing mimicking Fiona's voice on Edwin's radio wasn't M1 or Fiona's spirit. It was the Mimic
coffee
AI in
pot.
Edwin's
kidding.
inventions. Need more proof? In the game, you
I
can
really,
find a
John, I have to be really honest. No, not at all.
series of mail consisting of customer complaints regarding Edwin's inventions. All of these complaints have to do with the AI in the products acting strange, with one of them being for the Mycelium Men. These products, especially the Mycelium Men, were listening to and imitating private conversations.
Correct.
So with that in mind, I decided to look at the film where we hear Fiona say that specific line that Edwin heard through his radio. And I noticed that the first 13 seconds of the tape consists of Fiona just walking in silence up to Edwin's door. That seems like something Steelwell could have easily cut out, so why the big gap of silence? Well, I think they kept it in to show us where Fiona was physically standing when she said that line. We can see her walk up the stairs, turn left down the hall, and then walk up to the second door on her right. If you do the same thing
Before there were all the meat hooks hanging around. I know that they're not really meat hooks, but it's like the Mimic did that to like set traps for people. That's crazy.
in-game, that leads you to the door to Edwin's office that you need a code for. This is where Fiona was standing when she said that line. And if you turn around and look into the room directly behind her, you can see one of the Mycelium Men sitting on the desk.
my
Not only
gosh.
that, in the film, the camera turns
That's so great that they actually put one there, because they didn't have to do that necessarily, but they definitely want you. In that, I agree with John here that they want you to see that there is a Mycelium man within the vicinity that could have heard her say that.
around and points directly at this room for nearly 20 seconds. And because of this, we can see that the door to that room is open when she says the line,
That's
meaning
so
that the
smart.
mycelium man was listening to their private conversation the entire time. So this answers how the specific line from Fiona was being mimicked, but the next question is why? Why did Edwin hear this line coming from his radio in the first place? Well, to answer that, we need to go back to the commercials. In the commercial for the Stay Up Latte machine, we hear this.
I know what you want better than you do. I am always watching and learning.
The mimic AI in these machines knows what we want better than we do. They are always watching and learning. These things are scattered throughout Edwin's property, even in his home. They heard everything.
This is a very nice ornate chest. I missed this entirely. Oh, this is like totally in David's like little secret room area. Okay, never mind. I know why.
Heard everything, but I think the one thing they heard that single-handedly caused all of this to happen was this.
How am I supposed to tell David that his mother is gone? How am I supposed to raise a kid on my own? His life is ruined. My life is ruined.
When talking about Fiona's death, Edwin says, "How am I supposed to raise a kid on my own?" When he said that, I think the mimic AI in his inventions was listening and decided to do something about it. They were always watching and listening to everything. So the mimic program did what Edwin wanted and brought Fiona back.
Excellent, honey, but you're missing the point.
So the next question is, how did these things connect to Edwin's radio in the first place? Well, in the Mycelium Men commercial, it says that you can collect them all to, quote, let them jam.
Collect them all and let them jam.
The fact that these toys can all play the same song simultaneously could mean that these things are somehow wirelessly connecting to each other. This would make sense considering they're called mycelium men. One of the main functions of mycelium is communication. Quote, mycelium acts as an efficient communication system, linking trees, plants, and even other organisms. Through this intricate network, trees can exchange information, share resources, and warn each other of impending threats. I think the
That's
wireless...
such a great call out, because I've thought about that, like this in particular, this commercial, and how the mycelium men are able to communicate with each other. And funnily enough, like my thing about it was like looking at the stage and everything, I was like, oh, this could be trying to explain to us like that this is also why all the animatronics are able to kind of communicate with each other without speaking to each other, that they're also connected in this kind of system. Anyway.
Connection in these toys could be how they connected to Edwin's radio in the basement. There's also the fact that in the books and the games, it's been established that the mimic is able to interrupt radio signals and walkie-talkies. So I don't think it's a stretch to say that the mimic program in these toys was able to speak through Edwin's radio. I think this was the moment Edwin realized his inventions were mimicking Fiona, giving him the idea to create the mimic. This would make sense considering where we find this audio log. In the room where Edwin created the mimic. This is where the mimic was created, and the audio log on the wall is showing us where he got the idea from.
Oh, interesting. See, in my head, he did not necessarily create the mimic with the intention of Fiona's likeness being embodied by it. He just, similarly to in the books, like needed something to help him take care of David. And that would be a very interesting angle. I don't hate it, but it does make me not like Edwin even more because, geez Louise, dude.
Edwin then took everything he learned from his previous inventions and used it in the mimic.
Yeah, see, like this I like figured that this is what Still was telling us with the teasers, was they were showing us like, oh look, all of these components end up being made up into the mimic.
Ability to change size to fit any situation mixed with the same mimic program that was mimicking his wife. And I think it's fitting that at the end of the game, you can see one of the mycelium men sitting right next to M1.
Is it on top of a coffee pot? It is!
possibly being a nod to where the Mimic program came from, compared to where it is now. As we know, M1 did successfully start mimicking his wife Fiona, but we learn in the game that M1 insisted on keeping its existence a secret. This is why I think that Edwin wasn't 100% honest with David about M1 at first.
This is M1. Think of it as your new babysitter.
I do think Edwin also intended for M1 to be something he could eventually sell as an endoskeleton that can be any character, but I think the very first one was always meant to be Fiona. I think this because in the room where M1 was created, we see an image of it inside of a mascot costume, while also getting the audio log showing the Mimic program mimicking Fiona. Not only was M1 a great business idea, it was also a great way to potentially bring back his wife. But as we know, this doesn't really end up working out for Edwin in the end, and the main reason
I'm sorry. Just seeing those little guys do their little dance. This is a little bit messed me up. Hold on.
wife. But as we know, this doesn't really end up
Look at
working
him.
out for Edwin in the end. And the main reason everything
Okay,
falls
sorry.
apart isn't because Edwin created the Mimic endoskeleton to replace his wife, it's because of the paperclip.
Oh my gosh, I had already forgotten about the paperclip. Bring it home, Johnny.
I think this game was trying to tell us that something went wrong long before M1 or M2 even existed. Remember those messages from Edwin's customers complaining about his inventions acting strange? Well, there's actually a common theme throughout all of them.
It genuinely feels like every single person who's like bought one of these things is living their own little Fazbear Fright story.
The coffee machine worked at first, but then started serving up way too much caffeine, leading the customer to be hospitalized. The coat rack that could change its size worked at first, but then started changing its size a little too much. Each of these inventions were doing what they were programmed to do, but they were doing them to such an extreme degree that it started to become dangerous. I think Scott and Steelwool showed us these messages for one specific purpose:
To tell us that we should buy more paper clips.
point out the one specific flaw in Edwin's Mimic program.
Now, look how he does it. Not the one, the major. There's a lot.
2003, a philosopher named Nick Bostrom came up with a thought experiment surrounding AI and paperclips. He called
Oh. I would love to know exactly how John got on this train.
it the paperclip maximizer, and the idea is that if you give a poorly designed AI the goal of creating as many paperclips as possible, it will do anything to complete the job. Bostrom said, quote, "The AI will realize quickly that it would be much better if there were no humans, because humans might decide to switch it off. Because if humans do so, there would be fewer paperclips. Also, human bodies contain a lot of atoms that could be made into paperclips. The future that the AI would be trying to gear towards would be one in which there were a lot of paperclips, but no humans. Just like Edwin's inventions, this theory revolves around an AI that was given a harmless task, but it does it to such an extreme degree that it starts to become dangerous. This is exactly what we see with Edwin's Mimic program. The Mimic AI that Edwin created for these inventions was amazing, but it had one extremely consequential flaw. It lacked something called AI alignment. AI alignment is something that makes sure an AI aligns with human values and ethics. With AI alignment, if you give an AI the goal to create as many paperclips as possible, it will accomplish the task without doing any harm. But because Edwin never implemented human ethics and morals into his program, his inventions did what they were programmed to do, but to that extreme degree. And believe it or not, this one mistake by Edwin can be seen decades later in the Glamrock animatronics. We know because of the Tales from the Pizzaplex books that Edwin's Mimic AI is infecting the entire Pizzaplex, including the animatronics. Once again, they're doing what they were programmed to do, but to an extreme degree, making them dangerous. This can also be applied to M1. When M1 was given the task to take care of David, it was going to complete that task no matter the cost. But once David passed away, M1 was now unable to accomplish the task it was given. There was no longer a David to take care of. This is why, once David was gone, M1 begged Edwin to create M2 and bring David back.
He may say this, so I won't spend too long on it, but I want to say that based on John's own description of the paperclip maximizer, it stands to reason that it's not just that David died and then M1 didn't have a child to take care of, but that M1 would realize that David would eventually no longer be a child to take care of. It needed a permanent child, and a child that would be maybe even easier or more apt for it to take care of. Like, oh, it needs to be a robot child because I'm a robot. You know what I'm trying to say? Or it would be so much better if the child was a robot because then it couldn't die or get hurt, or it would be easier to fix, things like that. Or just more simply, like I said before, it would realize that David would eventually grow up and no longer be a child, and then that would be bad because its job was to take care of child David. So it wanted to make sure that David didn't grow up. But it almost seems as if the robot's M1's end goal would have been to make a robot David all along. Maybe because it felt some sense of superiority to humans, like FNAF was talking about with that experiment, or just that sort of prevention measure. He may ultimately reach that point, but assuming that he is just saying like, oh, well, David died unexpectedly and then there was no more child, just going off of his theory, there is actually evidence to suggest that M1 purposefully caused the death of David. I'll try to insert it here. And this is something that's like, people keep telling me it and then I remember and then I forget, but there is a hole in the fence of the playground that David plays in that would appear to have been manipulated by some very strong something, and M1 would make sense for that. M1 is who is supposed to go retrieve David to bring him to his party, then is presumably the one who finds David dead. As far as the books are concerned, I've even speculated in the past, before Secret of the Mimic even came out, that the Mimic may have been murderous and had some murderous intent before it was even really introduced to that. Not out of a violent tendency, but like we're talking about here, just it not being programmed with that level of humanity and getting its ideals conflated, like learn too much, then learn the wrong values and things like that. I think that there's even more to be said here, and I personally at this point would not be surprised if this was M1's kind of plan at a certain point, was to cause an accident of some kind that would influence Edwin to make another mimic that would actually David.
Edwin, calm down and give it some thought. Try again. Make another, and we can all be together.
And even after being trapped in the Mixes machine, M1 is still doing everything it can to bring David back.
Put that data diver in the inventory system. It'll go right to where it's needed.
M1 needs our data diver, but once we refuse to give it up, its tone immediately changes, and it starts saying anything it can to make us turn around.
Yes.
What are you doing? Don't you want a bonus? Or 2 bonuses? You can have a day off. You are not going to make it out of here alive. If you had just given me the schematics, we could have fixed things.
Up until the last second before we meet M1 face to face, it is still throwing every insult it can at us. M1 is desperate and out of options, and without an endoskeleton to occupy, it can't physically make us do anything. So it'll say any insult or threat that it can until we meet it face to face. When this happens, M1 switches its strategy from threatening to bargaining.
Yes. Okay, I'm so glad that John is like talking about this, because it's all just an attempt to manipulate. That's what it all is just right, exactly, like trying to reach its goal. You don't know how serious or like how much it's being honest with you at any point, even when you feel like, okay, the jig is up and now it needs to, or no, it's exposing its true colors. Even then, you cannot fully trust this program the whole time. You just can't, because it has an end goal and it is doing whatever it has to do to get what it wants. And that is why I ultimately believe that M1 specifically is what ends up being helpy moving forward. It even makes sense, especially since we see the Mr. and Mrs. Helpful here.
And here you are. Despite the circumstances, it is nice to meet you face to face.
Arnold could theoretically destroy or even unplug the Mix's machine, and M1 wouldn't be able to stop us, so it starts immediately playing to our emotions.
It is lonely down here. Edwin abandoned us.
This is another prime example of the Mimic AI doing its job to a dangerous degree. M1 doesn't have a David to take care of, so it doesn't care how many Fazbear technicians have to die. It wants David back, and it wants our data diver.
Fazbear will send another. Maybe that one will help me.
Towards the end of the game, you can find Edwin's first ever prototype of the Cleanovac. This prototype is later described as, quote, the vacuum pet, his greatest success and his greatest failure. You could interpret this a lot of ways, but the way I interpret it is that although the Cleanovac was a financial success, the Mimic program that Edwin created for it was what made it his biggest failure. These inventions were where it all started, and little did he know that the consequences of his greatest failure would be seen for decades to come. The story of the modern FNAF games is an extremely relevant cautionary tale, showcasing the dangers of what could happen if one poorly designed AI program got out of control. I know this probably felt more like...
Could you imagine if that ever happened? That's never gonna happen.
I know this probably felt more like a research essay than a groundbreaking theory with big reveals, but discussing the overall theme and where I think everything initially went wrong just felt right for my first video on such a big game. There is still a lot to talk about though, so make sure to subscribe for more theories. I hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.
No problem. Okay. Well, I guess it's time for final thoughts. First of all, I agree with a lot of that, and it's pretty clear that these more modern FNAF games have been cautionary tales about AI, but the paperclip thing was something I hadn't heard of before, and I actually would like to do a little bit of research on my own really quickly, actually. Philosophers have speculated that an AI tasked with a task such as creating paperclips might cause an apocalypse by learning to divert ever-increasing resources to the task and then learning how to resist our attempts to turn it off. But this column argues to do this, the paperclip-making AI would need to create another AI that could acquire power over both humans and over itself, and so it would self-regulate to prevent this outcome. Kind of, I wonder, maybe John just didn't read this article specifically, but this would have been an interesting thing to point out too, just as like a, hey, what, isn't that interesting that there's this further study on it by this person, Joshua Gans, from 2018, that's suggesting like, oh, sure, fine, but it would need a second version of itself. That would be that, and that's literally, you know, like what we see happen in Secret of the Mimic. Okay, I'm glad that I looked at that because that's so interesting. Humans who create AIs with the goals of acquiring power may be a greater existential threat. Well, yeah, you said that. I mean, this is from his website, but this is heavy. To the extent that ethics is a cognitive pursuit, a superintelligence could do it better than human thinkers. This means that questions about ethics, insofar as they have correct answers that can be arrived at by reasoning and weighting up of evidence, could be more accurately answered by a superintelligence than by humans. Woof. Okay. So, that is very heavy stuff, but like that I'm just not going to go into right now because it would take me who knows how long. But I did like what that Gans guy person added to the discussion, the idea that really in order to fully accomplish his goal, a second AI would need to be made. So with all that being said, I really do agree with a lot of what John is concluding here, but I would add, like I said earlier, that it is very possible that the M1 program actually had the thought that David would need to die to become the greater being of M2, right? And I think that a lot of the Tales stories go with that same notion. Robots having some murderous intent and others seeming to feel themselves better than people, or want to be people or want to be perceived as people. If you've read the Tale stories, you know what I'm talking about, but Nexi would be one that I would very much read as similar to this. And I would say the Bobby Dots is another really good example of that, because there are two iterations of the Bobby Dots, the original ones and the new ones. And the first set are like physical animatronics, and the second set are like all virtual, and I think they may have holograms, I can't remember, but completely virtual. There is no physical being of them. They are fully just a program. And the first model is proclaimed to be the dangerous of the two. But actually what ends up coming to light is that the second model they're the ones that actually believe themselves to be superior to humans, and they killed the last person who lived in the apartment and wanted to kill the main character of the Bobby Dots, who is ultimately able to overcome, spoilers, but I've had interpretations in the past of this, and we've talked about the idea, like, oh, there seem to definitely be two iterations of this mimic, very similarly to in the books, and now we have that confirmed. I think that's very interesting. The Bobby Dots is just interesting because it is specifically the second iteration of the mimic, of the program, the Bobby Dots program. They're the ones that think that they're superior to humans. However, in this instance, it would seem that even the M1 program, the first iteration of this more sentient mimic program, is the one that believes itself to be superior to humans. Now, we don't know that for a fact. F10's motivations are a little confusing, or not confusing, but, you could debate whether or not it's a matter of I'm superior, robots are superior, whatever this is so much better, so you should want this, or if it's more of I believe I am the mother of David, literally, and so I want my son back because I want to be a mom and I don't want to let anything stand in the way of that programming. The overall message being that all of this is AI, once again, that what we're looking at here isn't a spirit, isn't a haunting, a possession, or anything like that, but in fact, purely an AI gone rogue, or that has gained a level of intelligence, sentience, whatever, that it believes itself to be the same as or superior to the human race. It's trying to follow its programming, but has not established the correct morality to not understand that killing humans is bad. My only hang up with anybody talking about this stuff is, of course, what I always say to people, and that is that I really wholeheartedly do believe that Remnant is playing a really big part in all of this. I don't think that's gone. And I think I talk about this a lot. So if you've been here before when I'm talking about Five Nights at Freddy's, I'm sure you've heard me talk about Remnant. If you haven't seen that video, it'll be up here somewhere. I'm going to be redoing that video, though not totally redoing it. It's basically a part 2, but I'm going to include all of the information in part 2, and it's going to be like a longer video that goes into depth more about why I believe that Remnant is and has been being used as a power source for a very long time in this world. I think that it accounts for the main thing that I struggle with all of this stuff. And that is, it's the 70s, at the very latest, it's the 80s, but definitely all of the stuff Edwin does is in the 70s. And we're talking about some very, very intelligent AI. We're talking about some very advanced things that we all know didn't exist. They barely exist now. Like, we are now seeing things that could be the precursor to what the Mimic is in the 70s in this game. For me, Remnant solves that conundrum. And it doesn't have to be a spirit. It doesn't have to be a dead person. But I do believe that it's at play here in some capacity. It doesn't necessarily have to be something that the Murrays know about. It could just very well be happening around them. One thing that I do have to remind myself about is that clearly the world that Five Nights at Freddy's stuff takes place in is not our world. It's not future, right? It's still America in the 70s, in the 80s, 90s, whatever, what have you. But it's very clear that things are different. Even in the games that are set in more futuristic settings are still like, this is not something necessarily that we would have in life. And very much so when you read the books. Very much when you look at like Frights and Tales. I'm not saying that those are canon to the games or anything like that, but when you look at the kind of tech that is existing and just around in these instances, it's all a little like, this doesn't make sense for this time period, but there's a level of kind of, you're supposed to suspend your disbelief, I suppose, to just give in to, well, it's here in this world. So we may very well be looking at a timeline where technology advanced at a different rate than our world that we live in. The easiest way for me to be more certain about that is for something in the games to take us outside of just Fazbear Entertainment locations, Murray's Costume Manor like locations where this tech is like this, and say, okay, well, if I go to, say, like, if I went to just a Sears in this world, whatever Sears would be, and I'm talking about older times, and I'm just trying to think, I'm like, I don't know, the Sears Roebuck of the FNAF universe. If I go there, am I going to see any other people developing tech of this ilk? Or is it all going to be much more rudimentary, and somehow, some way, it's just in Murray's Costume Manor that these things are being manufactured? That would signify to me that Remnant potentially has a part to play in all of this. If it's fairly normal in this world for more advanced technology, it doesn't specifically have to be AI. I want that to be understood. But if this is just a different world where it just is that these more technological breakthroughs happened in the 60s, and so by the in the 70s it's like, okay, yeah, totally, he would be able to develop these things, then I would be a little less inclined to look for something that, well, like, how could this become such a smart thing, if he's calling it like a smart toy, a smart coffee pot. How could these things be smart all the way back then if otherwise this technology doesn't really seem to be there? And he's not even able to easily replicate the mimic itself. That all just sort of communicates to me that at the very least, it's not impossible for there to be something like Remnant at play in this story. And I think we just have a lot of things that kind of point to that. And the last thing I will say is that definitely later in the series, we are introduced to the concept of digital consciousness transference and that whole thing. So when we look at what is happening here with Fiona and the Mimic and the Mycelium, everything, all of it, it wouldn't surprise me if really what we're looking at is sort of a precursor to the digital consciousness transference, where somebody's, consciousness, I don't know how else to say it, is being somehow imbued into a piece of technology. And for me, Remnant is that. Like, that, to me, I'm like, the dominoes are falling into place for me with that. And I feel like at this point I'm just rambling, but I just wanted to kind of expound upon what John has said here. But I do appreciate the way that he has framed this conversation around Secret of the Mimic. I certainly don't think that he's the only one to kind of come to these conclusions, but the very specific direction that he took to get there, I like that. And I really also do really like the call out of these pieces of technology are listening and are responding to Edwin's grief. I do really like that they are responding to Edwin's grief. All that to say, I think at the end of the day, I could be grasping at straws to try to find some sort of supernatural element to still be at play in Five Nights at Freddy's, because what we're looking at here is starting to tell me more of what I, said I feared before Secret of the Mimic came out, where it almost seems like we're going to start explaining all of the animatronic mishaps from here on out as some kind of AI malfunction and or too literal of an interpretation of the programming at play or something to that effect. And or just AI getting so smart and sentient that it starts to have some level of autonomy. We've talked about, oh, well, it's possible that those first games, now that FNAF VR has happened, are diegetic, and they're just the games that exist in the literal world of Five Nights at Freddy's, but those things aren't literally how the events played out. If that's what's happening, that becomes something that I have to decide whether or not I want to accept and continue to really engage in that or not, just based on everything that has been set up and everything that we've spent almost 11 years, right, thinking and talking about with each other. Ultimately, I know that it's not a death sentence for the franchise at all, and it's objectively prescient for us to be having these conversations about AI, so it's topical and all those other things. I would just personally lose a level of attachment to the series. I think that's just fair to say. This is Scott's story. This is something that I said in a video recently where I was like, important to remember that, Steel Wool is the driving force behind the games themselves, but the driving force behind the story is still Scott Cawthon. And if he is rewriting the story to be more sci-fi than supernatural, I mean, really just like basically just a sci-fi story rather than a supernatural one, that's what he wants, and that's what it is going to be. I don't think that necessarily means that the first games meant nothing, right? I don't think that means that the whole time it wasn't, I think definitely objectively in the beginning of everything that's what we were looking at, but the new age of FNAF maybe crossing over into just this other more meta world where these games literally existed and all that stuff. I think that I have to stop talking. But thank you for watching, and thank you to John for introducing me to the paperclip maximizer thought experiment. That was really interesting to read about, learn about, hear about. I would love to hear what you guys think in the comments below, so make sure to leave your thoughts about not just John's theory, but, my expounding upon, and in general, I guess my big question would be, are you comfortable or happy with the direction that the story seems to be going based on Secret of the Mimic, or do you kind of disagree with the notion entirely that the possession isn't there? And because we do still have, of course, David, and at the very least, just that tiger costume in general, and the way that it seems to be able to project images right into your face, very similarly to Golden Freddy. I am holding out. I think that's very clear. I may be the last hanger on at the end of all of this, but I'm not interested in dropping the idea that there is a level of, in general, supernatural goings-ons in the world of Five Nights at Freddy's / Murray's Costume Manor at this point. But I'd love to hear what you guys think. If you haven't already, please remember to like the video before you pop out of here. And if you haven't already, subscribe to become a part of the Nervous System. I upload videos every other week right now, and I go live on Wednesdays and Fridays, usually. But if you can't wait, there are videos on the screen right now just for you. Okay, bye! Is it stable? The answer's no. Let's assume for a moment that this has just auto-played while you are doing laundry, folding the dishes. What? Help.